Hey everybody, my name is Terrie Riley. I am here as a bishop in the Madonna Interfaith community, and I'm here interviewing Charlie Sommer. I've known Charlie for over 20 years, and Charlie has been the mainstay of the Madonna Interfaith community for that length of time. Today, Charlie and I are going to be discussing the lineage of the Madonna Interfaith community and the Madonna Ministry International, which was our name prior to the recent change. We'll also be discussing what went into the name change and the reasons for it. So, Charlie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm happy to, Terry. Thank you for doing this. It's my pleasure to let people know more about our lineage and what that means to us as an organization. Right now, I can say that I'm a licensed, ordained minister in several communities, including the interfaith community. And that I have a family of 3 sons and 8 grandchildren and a great grandchild on the way. And I look very much forward to spreading the good word about our lineage of our interfaith community.
Thanks, Charlie. Now, when you say lineage, what do you mean by that?
I mean, it's our roots, our heritage, our background, line of succession, and apostolic succession.
So, when you say roots, what do you mean by that? Our ancestry? Can you explain that?
Yes, it's the ancestry or the development of our root, or our church and our community. And it begins pretty much with the book Blessed Among Women by Arnold Michael. One can glean that our history started in the house of David, one Hebrew lineage through Mary, the mother of Jesus, and one Parisian lineage through Joseph, the father of Jesus. In actuality, we go back many centuries earlier to the priesthood of Melchizedek. This is the name of the priesthood lineage that Jesus was a member of. He was a noted scholar. Later, after his passing, was called the Christ, or the Enlightened One.
So our lineage goes back all the way to the house of Melchizedek and Jesus himself. Is that accurate?
Yes, it definitely goes back thousands of years beyond the birth of Jesus to Melchizedek, who was a king, noted to be a king, and also a high priest. There's not much other known about him other than he might have had a virgin birth, but no one's sure about that.
So how does all of this ancient lineage tie into the Madonna Interfaith community?
Well, the Madonna Interfaith community, whose motto is awakening spiritually through service and education, is deeply rooted in the Melchizedek priesthood and the Hebrew and Persian teachings that were emulated by the Holy Family, whose story is told in the book Blessed Among Women. I'll say more about that subject later.
Okay. Now you mentioned Arnold Michael. Who is Arnold Michael?
Well, Arnold Michael was a member of the Church of Religious Science. But long before that, he was, in 1946, he was working at the Hotel Laguna as their manager, and he met a stranger on the beach, and the stranger gave him a manuscript that was handed to him, and it touched him so deeply that he took a sabbatical from work and went up to the mountains in Pine Valley outside of San Diego and completed the book in about 3 months. So that's how Arnold got a hold of the material. And I met Arnold through the book, Blessed Among Women. When I read it, it was the most moving book I've ever read in my entire life. So I connected with Arnold, and that's kind of the basis of Arnold Michael's beginning and in the spiritual understanding.
And so he wrote the book that Blessed Among Women that you've already said you're going to be speaking about later.
Yes, he developed that book long before he was a minister. He had spiritual interests, and he met a bishop from the old Catholic Church in Laguna Beach, a Bishop Waddell, and he was a wonderful teacher and somewhat of a mystic. And he taught Arnold a lot of wonderful things, which spurred him on, and eventually he decided to go into the ministry and join the Fellowship of Religious Science.
Okay, so when you talk about apostolic succession, what do you really mean by that?
Okay, apostolic succession started with the Romans hierarchy, and because that was their way of describing the movement. And what happened was the first church in Antioch was called a Christian church. It developed spiritual leaderships of both men and women. And out of that came the first leader, which the Romans later called bishops. So in that bishop apostolic succession, there is a line of bishops that continue from the first bishop. The head of the church was Peter, and later Paul. And out of that continuity continues today. Now, also, as we all know, that there's bishops that have done improprieties throughout the ages. There have been church leaders that have tainted that title of bishop. But we took that title on not as a form of power, but as a form of leadership through synergy and through humility. And we know that out of the mind of all God's children, we can make really good choices and decisions. And so the apostolic succession for us in our community means it's a form of leadership voluntarily, and to teach and to implement the notion and ideas of spiritual community.
So spiritual authority, what can you say about that? The spiritual authority that derives out of the title bishop?
Well, the authority through the historical lineage, it carried through to where we picked it up was through the bishops in Holland. And the bishops in Holland, what they did was when the Pope declared himself infallible, the bishops in Holland said, wait a minute, everyone has intuition, everyone can be inspired. It's just not one person. So they then decided to not obey the Pope, but kept the lineage going. And so whoever they ordained and consecrated after that became part of the apostolic succession. We picked ours up through them, through a French bishop who came to the United States and essentially established the old Catholic Church here. They didn't have the allegiance to Rome, but they followed the same teachings and principles of what they understood Christianity to be.
So you mentioned some of the heinous or terrible acts that have been done by bishops. Have they done anything good? Is there a goodness to being bishop?
Yeah. Well, there are many outstanding examples throughout history of leaders in the Roman Catholic Church and in Greek Orthodox and Russian Orthodox, and out of Protestantism came a lot of fine spiritual leaders. The one that I appreciate one of the most is St. Francis of Assisi, because he was in the order of Melchizedek, because he received his inner guidance directly from Source. And he accomplished marvelous things, along with a young lady that grew up in the same area of Italy, St. Clare, who started the Order of St. Clare. And they weren't all about power, they were all about service to humanity. And so there are a lot of remarkable leaders that are spiritually guided, intuitively in contact with their, you could say, higher self. And out of their works, people like Martin Luther King, certainly Mother Teresa, and many others that have performed consistently throughout the ages from a more enlightened place.
Now, I've read some of your writings, Charlie, on Lineage, and you talk about a heart-to-heart connection. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, fundamentally, that's the metaphor that we use for outstanding spiritual teachers, that they come from their heart through their compassion. And we understand our understanding of this thing we call God to be a loving God, a compassionate God, an all-giving God. And so people that come from the heart centers, then you often notice the good works that they do in our local and national and global communities. And one of the persons that come to mind was Robert Mueller. He was Assistant Secretary of the UN, and he read Arnold Michael's second book that he wrote probably about 15, 20 years after he wrote Blessed Among Women. He wrote the book Brothers of the Great. And the UN Assistant Secretary General said it was the first world's classic novel that taught peace. And as we know, that Jesus' message and all spiritual teachers' messages are to exude peace, to live peace, to learn what peace is. We need to express it, and it comes through the heart and clarity of mind, and it emanates in some type of beneficial service to the communities where they work.
So when you talk about being pure of heart and keen of mind, in some of your writings you've discussed Mary and Jesus as being examples of how to live a spiritually based life. Is that come through in Arnold Michael's book, Blessed Among Women?
Yes, definitely in the book Blessed Among Women, which, let me give you a little background in that. Lady Mumford Finkelstein of Israel in the early 19th century came over here and lectured, and she also wrote some books. And she was of the last lineage from the house of David to pass on the oral tradition of the Holy Family. And she put it into writing and created that manuscript that Arnold wrote the book from in 1946. And she was so familiar with the idioms and the way people lived in those days that it provides tremendous information about the Holy Family. And the Persian lineage that Joseph came from, there's wonderful examples of how he was attempting to end the sacrifice of animals in the temples in those days, because he was an advanced spiritual being. Mary, in her lineage, they came from royalty. They were both princes in the house, and she was a princess and he was a prince in the house of David. And so they had wealth, they had money, they had position, they had power. And when they went to Bethlehem to pay their taxes on their property, that's when they heard about King Herod wanting to kill the firstborn children. So they fled to Egypt. And in Egypt, the Holy Family, and certainly Jesus and his brother John, met master spiritual teachers from the lineage of Melchizedek. And they received some additional training long before they did their public ministries. Anyway, the book is so alive and so rich, and it tells things like Mother Mary, after Jesus' passing, became a mentor to many of Jesus' disciples because of her enlightenment. And that's the reason she's called the Immaculate Conception, is because her parents were very pure, were very kind, and came from their hearts and clear minds before they gave birth to Mary. So she could then be the birther of Jesus and bring forth a master teacher in the world to teach really what love means. I could go on for days, but I want to get on with this interview.
Okay, well, we'll continue that part of it in another interview, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about Arnold Michael. I understand he was a Baptist and really didn't even know much about Mary when he got the manuscript. Is that true?
That's true. Arnold was raised in the South and went to a Southern college. And his first problem with Christianity was in his church. He wanted to marry someone, I think it was outside of his faith or something, and there was a problem. So he didn't marry this woman that I guess he met in college. He came to California, and you're right, he did not have any relationship with Mother Mary. He just relationship was with Jesus and what he was taught.
So it's interesting that he would have been given that manuscript because he was essentially a blank page when he got it.
Yes, so there must have been something in him that awakened, and that's how he met Bishop Waddell. He was studying metaphysics, that which is beyond appearances, and And when he later became a teacher and established a number of churches under the auspices of the Church of Religious Science, which was a fledgling church that had the audacity to say that we're all children of God, no matter who we are, but God is the only creator. And so that was kind of refreshing to hear and to teach, and it puts the responsibility on we spiritual children of God to learn what our essence is. Our real lineage is a direct connection to the source of life. And Arnold taught that, he lived it, he believed it, and eventually when he retired, he gave up his church in Sacramento and retired and moved up into the Pine Mountains, again, this time above Sacramento, where he had a mystical experience with a pine tree. He had people coming from his church that still wanted his teaching, so he would have gatherings there on a Sunday afternoon. I don't know what his specific mystical experience was, but out of that he created the Church of the Talking Pines.
Now, Arnold Michael was often called Dr. Mike. Why was he called that?
He was called Dr. Mike because in the religious science community, where he was also a teacher, he was bestowed 2 honorary degrees for the work he did, and particularly for the 2 books that were so outstanding and well received. Let me get back to Blessed Among Women. This book, when Arnold Michael wrote that in the 1946 area, he never published a book. He never had written a book before. But somehow, a person with a pen name of Star Daly, who had been a criminal, and he was in solitary confinement in prison in San Bernardino, when he had an epiphany or an enlightening experience, kind of like the Apostle Paul had in Damascus. And out of that, he then became more connected to his heart center and also met a person that was a spiritual teacher in his prison. And when he was released a lot sooner than normally expected because of his change of behavior, he went on to teach others, like 7-Eleven stores, how to protect themselves against people like him. So he became very popular, made a lot of money, somehow connected with Arnold Michael, and provided the funds for the first printing of Blessed Among Women.
What an amazing story. The Michaels, did they move? I think they lived in Ojai, California for a time. Is that right?
Yes. When he moved out of this area from the mountains above San Francisco, he moved to Ojai, which is, many of us know, is a seat of spiritual or communities. In Ojai, there are many communities teaching various modalities of spirituality. And so while he was there, he met some bishops that were part of the Old Catholic Church in that community. And they connected and they saw the work he was doing, and they consecrated him a bishop into the Old Catholic Church. And out of that, he decided he would begin ordaining people, now that he had the right of apostolic succession and the right of priesthood, that he could do that. And his wife, Kay, and I were two of the 50 or so beneficiaries of being ordained by Arnold.
So, Charlie, I'm not familiar with the old Catholic Church. What is that?
The Old Catholic Church is the group that had originally started, they were in the Netherlands and Holland, and that's the group that broke away from the Catholic dominance where the Pope considered himself infallible and only he could talk deeply on spiritual things. And so they said, no, that's not the way it is. So the old Catholic, they became what's called the Old Catholic Church that migrated its way here to Southern California through a French bishop. I don't remember his name these days, but there were at least about 4 or 5 or 6 bishops that were functioning and running what's called the Old Catholic Church. Somehow they connected with Arnold Michael, and he, in a ceremony, was consecrated bishop through laying on of hands and through ceremonial traditions by several bishops. And one of those bishops was Bishop Warren Waters, who lived in Santa Barbara. And the reason I mention that is because later, after Arnold's passing, his wife Kay and I were tutored into the Old Catholic Church, which at that time the church was called was given the same name as the first Catholic church in Antioch. It was called the Church of Antioch. So Bishop Warren Waters and his wife were both bishops in the Antioch church. And then Warren went on to train a number of people and eventually consecrated about, I think there were 7 of us, 8 of us maybe, into not only ordaining into the priesthood, but we later consecrated into the bishop apostolic succession that came out of the Old Catholic Church, went through the church that they called Antioch, the Free Church, and then we developed out of that the Free Church of Antioch, because Warren Waters was not tied down to dogma. He was more into spiritual understanding, and he did not want dogma to get in the way of honoring and recognizing the spirituality in other people. And so we were fortunate then, Kay and I were eventually trained and made into priests and then eventually into bishops, so that I was able to carry that on into what we later changed the name of the Church of the Talking Pines to the Madonna Ministry. So I was able, and Kay and I were able to carry that lineage into further into the Church of Talking Pines, and we extended what Arnold had originally did. He endowed, he consecrated, and ordained a number of about 50 people or so into what was he called the Church of the Talking Pines. And the way it made its transition is in his retirement years in Ojai, he developed an intuitive relationship with Mother Mary. And out of that, he wrote something like 24 newsletters over a period of a couple of years. And he called it the Madonna Ministry, working under the auspices of the Church of the Talking Pines. That's how the connection was made to the first calling of our church, the Madonna Ministry.
So it sounds to me, if I'm understanding what you've been telling me, that our lineage goes all the way back through the Catholic Church, to the Old Catholic Church, to the Church of Antioch, the Free Church of Antioch, the Church of the Talking Pines, and then the Madonna Ministry. Is that right?
Yes, but historically, it's much deeper than what the Roman Catholic Church picked up, because Melchizedek priesthood, there were two priesthoods in the ancient Hebrew tradition. And one was the priesthood of Melchizedek order, and then there was another priesthood that I don't remember the name of right now. But it was more of a carnal church. It was more, those priests were more into power and control. While the Melchizedek priesthood exemplified the spiritual understanding or the enlightened way of being, not unlike the Buddha. I love the Buddha teaching the middle path. And the middle path is the enlightened way. And the enlightened way is the peaceful, compassionate expression that Jesus taught, that Mary taught, that Joseph taught, that so many other saints and sages that have this interconnection to the Melchizedek priesthood. And so those roots are at least 3,000 years old.
So just recently, we changed our name from the Madonna Ministry to the Madonna Interfaith Community. What was behind the change?
Well, one of the things that became apparent to me is that both Jesus and Mary taught and are still teaching that God is within us all, and we need to find that within ourselves before we can begin to live a spiritual life. Neither one of Jesus or Mary or Joseph, neither of them held themselves up as the answer or the God. Jesus made it very clear that he was the Father within him that does the work. And Mary was certainly aligned with that understanding. So when the Archangel Gabriel appeared to her and said, "You are blessed among women because you're going to be giving birth to this Emmanuel, to this enlightened being that we call Jesus," she was chosen for that. But it's out of her humility and out of Jesus' humility and out of Joseph's humility that we have the true foundation of Christian teachings. And the true foundation of any spiritual teaching are all the same. They're going to teach us to live peacefully, honor that peace within ourselves, no matter what the circumstances are beyond us. And they taught us and are teaching us to live a compassionate life, and that is reflecting the essence of what we understand God to be, or this thing itself, or this thing we can't possibly describe, that's so much greater than anyone knows, but we can identify with. And it's out of that identity or that resemblance that when we discover it within ourselves, then we open the door to our own enlightenment. And that's where light overcomes darkness.
And so it sounds like by changing the name to the Madonna Interfaith Community, we honor not only Mary as the Mother of God, but the feminine in all of her forms, as well as the masculine in all forms. In other words, it sounds like our name reflects our desire to become enlightened and through whichever path presents itself. Is that accurate?
Yes, that Arnold made it quite clear in his teaching that, we talk of the divine feminine, which is another way of saying it's a creative medium. It's the aspect of God that puts itself into creation, whatever its creation is. So the creative medium is likened to the womb of a woman that gives birth, and out of that birth comes something beautiful. So when we look at the principle of the divine feminine, we respect it because it is part of the trinity of life. That it takes the masculine aspect of, in Christian traditions, we call it the Word of God. And the Word of God is that masculine energy, it's the will of God, that when those words are spoken, go into the divine feminine, or the creative medium, and produce beautiful, harmonious results. And we, as a humankind that are not fully awakened, then we don't get the full result of what God created. We create something less, and we create all kinds of problems. But the answer that Jesus and so many other spiritual teachers have given us from all traditions and all backgrounds are the honor the presence of this mystical thing we call God or Great Spirit. As we learn to understand what it is and how it expresses through each of us, then we create a better society, a better country, a better humanity, and it has benefits that ripple through everything, through the earth. There is no abuse in the aspects of love, the aspects of light, the aspects of power, out of the purity of what God is. Now, yes, so making the transition, why do we call ourselves the Madonna Interfaith Community? One is because of the powerful book that Arnold wrote and how the Holy Family set the example of a beautiful spiritual life and what each of them needed to do. They gave us a great example. And so we appreciate Mary for her presence and her help as we would any spiritual master teacher. But we also recognize that there are many master teachers out there that teach excellent varieties of spirituality. We get back to the Church of the Talking Pines, for instance. Now we're dealing with nature. And all indigenous people that were close to the spirit of life, they recognize the holiness. They recognize the essence. It's in everything and everyone. So Arnold, even though he was a religious scientist, which means science, you study the scientific method, and religion because you have a faith in a way that works for you. He also had an insight into nature, into the nature of God in God expressing in all forms of creation. So we, in the interfaith community, we want to recognize everyone and everything that's expressing their authenticity, which we believe is the essence of God, the essence of life. Excuse me.
Sure. So for anyone who's thinking about becoming a member of the Madonna Interfaith community or possibly being ordained, I guess what I'm hearing you say is there really is no dogma, but just a desire to grow spiritually and to belong to a community. Does that sound right?
Yes, but I also need to emphasize that in our community, part of our process is to recognize the presence of God in each member of our community. And we recognize them in ceremony. And the ceremony is designed very specifically to empower them to bring into fruition something that's been held back, something they have a yearning to create, develop, to do. And we help them fulfill that through a very fine, what we would call ordination of empowerment. We use that as a sacrament to help bring people out further into expressing their authentic selves.
Thank you, Charlie, for that. When you say authentic self, that is the essence of divinity. Does that sound right?
Yeah, the essence of something that is in everything, that intuitively is knowable, and ideally, once a person is able to tune into that essence, then we can celebrate life that is in everyone and everything. And that's the essence of life itself. Now, that progression of life, we're recognizing, takes on many different forms, and it takes on many different approaches to understanding how life works, or how the life of God works, how the thing itself works. And so Arnold discovered a method of ceremony, a method of prayer that helps enliven to bring out this authentic nature out of ourselves. Because we're all created in the image and likeness of whatever this thing we call God is. And we all look different. We have different thumbprints. We have different appearances, different sizes and shapes and colors. And we're all made up of the same etheric, essential, call it substance, that is in all creation. It's in everything. So we want to keep together with like-minded people who see the value of living life peacefully, who want to have an enjoyable, happy life. They know, first of all, we've got to seek and find that kingdom of good within ourselves. And that's what we help elicit in our interfaith community. And we're very much appreciative to all the saints and sages that have brought this awareness forward and helped us along the way. I don't hear your Microsoft.
I was talking to myself. Charlie, as always, it's been amazing speaking with you. Hopefully, we'll get some more of these interviews going where we are able to share your wisdom and help to clarify really what we are as a community. For anyone who is watching this video, maybe somewhere down the road, if you wish to become a member of the Madonna Interfaith community, please contact our website at www.madonnaministry.net. And there you will be able to find some more information as well as contact information. So thank you, Charlie. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity while I'm still in this body. Thank you, my dear.